Rory.
Es un honor muy grande para nosotros tenerlas aquí hoy con usted. Thank you so much for joining us, like what you said. Para comenzar, la primera pregunta la vamos a hacer en español.
Okay.
Por ahí escuché que al igual que muchos de nosotros, le encanta el mundo de la farándula. A mí me fascina. En una entrevista con Alejandra Espinosa, usted confesó que le encanta el reggaetón y quería saber si hay alguna canción o algún artista en especial que en este momento la tenga en su playlist que la escucha sin parar.
Bueno, sí me gusta el reggaetón. No sé si es por mi espíritu juvenil o porque tengo hijas que tienen 23 y 25 años y escucho la música todo el tiempo. Y sí, me gusta mucho ese ritmo. No te voy a decir que tengo específicamente algún playlist porque escucho los playlists y sigo en Spotify las listas de mis hijas. Para mí es mucho más fácil hacerlo así. Pero sí tengo uno favorito. J Balvin es mi favorito. Te voy a decir por qué. Yo lo entrevisté hace unos años y me impresionó como artista y como persona. Se me hace un excelente ser humano. Pasamos todo el día con él en su casa en Colombia y vi cómo trataba a su gente, cómo llegaba personas del barrio a saludarlo. Y él siempre muy amable con los niños, con todos. Y se me hace que ha logrado muchas cosas y se mantiene todavía con los pies en la tierra. Así es que aparte de que me gusta su talento, me gusta que, que, sea muy creativo, lo mucho que ha logrado profesionalmente. Tiene una mente de empresario, yo creo
Sí,
que más que cualquier otra cosa. Por eso siempre dice la familia y el negocio, porque siempre está pensando en negocios. Y bueno, pero también me gustan varios otros.
sí. Qué bien que menciona a J Balvin, porque la siguiente pregunta ahora cambiamos al español. In the past, you've interviewed both Shakira and Jennifer Lopez. So you live in Miami, so I got to ask this. What did you think of their Super Bowl halftime performance? And more than anything, what do you think that meant for Latinos as a whole? It was something that we had clearly never seen.
Right. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people are now saying that was really the end of the year.
Of
That was our
2020.
New Year's. Because right after the Super Bowl, things started going downhill in our country. I think it was wonderful that they were there. It wasn't, I think, only representative of Miami. Shakira is not from Miami, although Miami is the hub for Latin music nowadays. I personally was there and I was very lucky. It's the first time I go to a Super Bowl. And I went because my nephew is the art director for NFL Network. So that doesn't mean he gets free tickets. That just means he gets access to tickets. So we still had to pay, but my sister and I wanted to be with my nephew. And I think it was an amazing performance. And it showed the strength of Latinos and the importance of Latinos. You know, one of the last documentaries that I did when I was at Univision before leaving was called Latinación or Latination, where we were showing the contributions that Latinos make in this country, whether it's economically or culturally. And talking to someone from the Pew Research Center, which is one of the most important and more accurate research centers in the country, I asked him, you know, how does mainstream America, which is not a good way to say it because Latinos are also mainstream, we're part of this society, but what do people, you know, feel or how do they perceive and what do they think of immigrants and Latinos? And he said, when it comes to food and music, they have very high image of them. When it comes to job and immigration and the economy, they have a very negative view of them. So it just goes to show you that they love our music, they love our food, but they don't necessarily want us around. So having Shakira and two very successful international stars showing that you like our music, well, guess what? We are Latinas. One, a New Rican, and the other one from Spain, who has taken from Colombia, who lives in Spain, who has taken that music all over the world. So I thought it was a very symbolic event, other than being very entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like, we're here, get used to us. We're not going anywhere.
Oh, no.
Yeah, for sure. La siguiente pregunta aquí le pregunta a alguien, si pudiera entrevistar a alguien que está en vida o que ya falleció, ¿quién sería y por qué?
Quizás le va a sorprender mi respuesta. Si pudiera entrevistar a alguien sería a mi padre que falleció en 1985. Y la razón es que después de que mi padre murió, yo aprendí muchas cosas de él. Un amigo
Sí,
de él me trajo una caja que estaba guardando en su almacén, y en esa caja encontré mucha información que yo no sabía de mi padre, como por ejemplo que había sido sacerdote católico.
sí lo
Entonces hay muchas
recuerdo.
cosas que yo no sabía de mi familia, y me encantaría poder preguntarle, no solamente por la familia, sino por qué nunca nos dijo, por qué tuvo que cargar con ese peso tan grande de mantener un secreto cuando lo pude haber compartido con sus hijas y podíamos haber tenido un diálogo y quizás hubiéramos roto esa barrera que a veces hay de comunicación entre los padres y los hijos, ¿no? Así es que me gustaría entrevistarlo.
Sí, yo recuerdo una entrevista que hizo para Univision que comentó, porque tiene un libro ah, que habla de eso. También aquí, nunca le ha interesado entrevistar a alguien como el Papa, siendo
Claro,
el primer latinoamericano hoy.
por supuesto, yo tenía mucho interés en entrevistar al Papa Juan Pablo II. I'm going to say it in both English and Spanish, as
Ajá.
who have I ever been interested in interviewing the Pope? Yes, I think I was first interested in interviewing Pope John Paul II, el Papa Juan Pablo II, porque me tocó cubrir 12 de sus viajes. I covered 12 of his trips a Latinoamérica, a Estados Unidos, en Roma, incluso cubrí su funeral. Desafortunadamente, también su funeral.
Yeah.
I covered the Pope in 12 of his trips to Latin America, here to the US, and finally I covered his funeral. But there was just something about him that I thought was very interesting. So the interview wouldn't necessarily be from a religious point of view, and you might think it's crazy because he is the Pope after all, es el Papa. But there was just something that a strength that he had, an energy that he had, that I saw the reaction of people when he would show up in these different Latin American countries, people that might not have even been Catholic. So he sort of like brought an aura of hope to people, even though he could never solve their problems or make their life better. So I always thought he was an interesting character. And of course, I would love to interview Papa Francisco. Me gustaría entrevistar al Papa Francisco, porque está tratando de revolucionar la iglesia, tiene una manera muy distinta de pensar y enfrenta muchos retos. He has a different way of thinking. He's a different approach, and he's trying to revolutionize the church. So he's also someone that I would love to interview.
Yeah, Pope Francis is definitely an interesting one. Who's left for you to interview? You've interviewed an extended amount of folks. ¿A quién le falta entrevistar a Maria Elena Salinas?
You know that the most important interview you do is the interview with the person that is in the headlines at the moment. Because if you ask me what's the most important interview that you've done in your life, well, it depends. When? Was it Pinochet when Pinochet was still in power, when he was leaving? Or was it Subcomandante Marcos in Mexico when he came into the country? At that moment, he was the interview to get. Was it President Obama when he started his presidency? President Obama was the one that I interviewed the most. Was it President Clinton when he was leaving? Was it the several dictators from Latin America? So it depends. You know, when you want to get an interview, you want to get the interview. Whoever is in the headlines, whoever gets the exclusive interview is the one that you want to get. So tell me who's going to be in the headlines next, and
and you'll let me know.
Yeah.
Talking
Not
about
everybody that's in the headlines is interesting to me, but
talking about precedents, of all the U.S. presidents that you have interviewed in the past, which one did you find the most interesting, and why would that be?
I mean, I have to say Obama, and I'll tell you why. He was one of the few presidents that actually listened to your question and answered it. It's very normal for politicians to answer whatever they want to answer. They usually have a pivot. And if you watch interviews with politicians, you will see that you will ask them something and they will say, well, yes, but what I want to tell you is, I mean, tell me who doesn't do that. They all do that, whether it's a one-on-one interview, whether it's in a debate, you know, in whatever forum there is, that's what they usually do. So one interesting thing about Obama is that he actually answered the question. Of course, later on, he would go into his spiel, whatever he wanted to sell or whatever idea he wanted to get across. But I found that interesting. Even more interesting was Michelle Obama. She's a brilliant woman, very, very smart woman. She was fascinating. And it's a shame that she's not interested in politics.
Yeah. And keeping the topic going about presidents, in an interview with your former co-host, Teresa Rodriguez, you said that you would not interview President Trump. Do you still feel that same way? And has there been a moment when you wanted to change your mind? Maybe you wanted to ask just that one question that he maybe hasn't answered or somebody hasn't necessarily asked?
Right. You know, there's a difference between wanting to interview someone and having questions. I have a long list of questions that I would like to ask President Trump, but why wouldn't I want to? Why did I not want to interview President Trump? Because I believe that in interviews, the most important thing about an interview is getting answers, is whatever you're able to get from that interview, whatever information that's valuable, you can provide to your viewers or to your readers, that person has to offer. And I honestly do not think that an interview with President Trump would bring about anything other than what he, his alternative facts. And I'm saying this not to insult anyone, but since the very beginning, I think he has not been, honest, or he's had a little bit of problem with the truth. So I think interviewing him at this stage, because it would be an option. I mean, if I was right now an anchor in a network, that is important. It's a very important interview. He is the president of the United States, and it's very important for anyone to talk to the president of the United States. But as a choice, the way that I view interviews, like I said before, it's you want to get answers. Otherwise, it would be the headline would be what question I asked, or how tough can it be? And as a journalist, you're not supposed to draw attention to yourself. You cannot become the story. And I'm not interested in becoming the story of someone who asked him tough questions about immigration, maybe that no one ever dared to answer. But, I can possibly imagine that the response is not necessarily going to be something that will be productive to.
Yeah, for sure. So in that sense, would you say that either the lack of honesty is the biggest difference between being a journalist now in the Trump era as for the Obama administration?
What do you mean the lack of honesty?
The lack of to answer questions and putting up alternative facts all the time.
No, because he's very accessible to journalists. It's just that, he has a very difficult relationship with journalists, and in the years that I have been working, I can't remember in my lifetime, in fact, any head of state that has treated journalists the way he has treated journalists. So it's not that he's not accessible. I think there's a big difference between his presidency and not only Obama and everyone else before him, whether they are Republican or Democrat. There's a certain respect and decorum. Presidents usually don't like journalists, but they still treat them with respect because the politicians are doing their job and the journalists are doing their job also. But they never treat them with such insults, with such disdain, trying to discredit them in frankly, sometimes a vulgar manner. And I think that is one of the differences here. But not that he's not accessible, because on the contrary, I think he likes to make himself accessible. He likes to answer questions and just throw out there whatever he wants the next headline to be. And to his credit, he is a master at marketing, and he knows how to change the subject. If there's something that is in the headlines that he doesn't like, he will do something, even if he knows it's not going to be popular or it's not going to be positive, just to get the headlines, because he knows that journalists will go out and will talk about that new subject for hours and hours and hours, or sometimes days and days and days.
Yeah, I also believe the same thing. And talking about President Trump now, just a couple of weeks ago, we saw the first presidential debate take place between Joe Biden and President Trump. If you had gotten the interview this election cycle, just like you have in the past of hosting a debate, what's the one thing that you would have asked out of both of them? we saw that there was no question particularly about immigration. So would that have been a take that you wanted to take, or what would you have
Well, I
want
mean,
them to
yeah,
ask?
there's a lot, I think a lot of questions, especially follow-ups that
Yeah.
usually in a debate, you would hope that the moderator would ask more follow-up questions when it's very obvious that each one of the candidates or either one of the candidates is not stating fact. So of course there's follow-ups that you would like to do, but I think that when Latinos have been ignored in the debate so far, even though Latino voters are interested in the same issues that everyone else is interested in, the economy right now, healthcare and coronavirus, jobs, the economy, they care about social justice. Immigration usually comes fourth or fifth on the list of issues that concern voters individually. Now, if you see a poll where immigration is number one, it's usually because they say, what is the issue that is affecting your community? Mm-hmm. Possibly, if I had to ask a question about immigration, there's two topics that I think I would be interested in, and one of them is DACA and why he's trying to destroy DACA, that to President Trump and to Vice President Biden. He keeps promising that he will legalize DACA or that he will turn it into law, yet it's not in his power. So sometimes you have presidents that promise you so many things that it's not in their power to do. Just like when President Obama promised immigration reform. So did President Bush, and he was not able to accomplish it. It is Congress who has to approve it and not a president. So, how are you going to accomplish something if you don't have the support of Congress? Even President Bush, who did have the support of Congress or had Congress on his side, was not able to get immigration reform passed. And the other thing I would ask, I think, in regards to that is there's a lot of rhetoric, and President Trump always says, no, it's the illegals, which I think is a horrible term, that because no human being is illegal, let's say for the sake of this, the undocumented immigrants that I'm against and not legal immigrants. Yet the majority of the laws, not laws, but the actions that he has taken, or the new rules
policies,
that have to do with immigration, are to curtail legal immigration. So, it's, I don't know.
Yeah, real quick. I think Professor Phelps wanted to make a point real quick. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to read a question from the chat, if you would. Vanessa Booth asks, as someone who has worked for major outlets like NBC, MSNBC, I have noticed at times it can be difficult to hold opinions of your own while staying true to the mission of the outlet and your viewers. How do you go about delivering unbiased reporting while also staying true to your values?
If you ask me personally, I have always kept my opinions to myself. And I'm a little bit old school when it comes to that, because right now we're in a chat with the political science class. I'm not on the air. So I've always been able to separate my opinions from my work, my personal views and my opinions from my work on television. But I do think that it's important nowadays, not so much to be objective, because I think objectivity is something that in journalism is becoming passé. No one talks about being objective anymore. You talk about balance. You talk about making sure that you are giving both sides, so that you are giving a perspective and giving context to a story. And I think that is important. So you mentioned you worked at MSNBC. There's a phenomenon with 24-hour news networks, or not networks, but cable companies, and that there's such a fine line between news and opinion that the viewer doesn't really know how to differentiate. And you could see that in MSNBC and CNN and in Fox News, depending who's on and depending what type of show it is, whether it's a commentary or whether it's or just news, reporting news, people don't know what to believe anymore. They don't know. And I think that is a problem. And I think that is in a way hurting the profession because it just sort of like backs the argument that journalists are biased or that journalists are, you know, are whatever Democrats or whatever Trump says that they are complicit with the opposition. And that's not true. I mean, we have to remember that journalism is a very noble profession. It is a pillar of our democracy. The job of a journalist is to seek the truth, to denounce injustice, and to uncover corruption. I mean, that is our job, that we are supposed to question those in power. And when we're the only filter between those in power and the people that they are governing. So what do you do when you have governments that want to control the media? You know, borderline authoritarian or full-blown authoritarian governments, the first thing they want to do is silence the media. They go to extremes, like in the case of Khashoggi, they kill them. Or in case of Mexico, there's a lot of journalists that have been killed in Mexico. In fact, it's one of the most dangerous countries to practice the profession of journalism. Or they shut you down, or they put you in jail, or they try to discredit you and call you the enemy of the people. I mean, that's what governments do that want to silence you. Because if we didn't have the power that we have, why would they want to silence us?
That's a really good answer, and it's even better for the next question. So last year, in an interview of a couple of minutes that only took place a couple of minutes, your former co-host of Noticiero Univision, Jorge Ramos, and his crew were detained and held captive for nearly 3 hours at the Palacio de Miraflores in Caracas, Venezuela, at the order of leader Nicolás Maduro. Can you tell me how you felt when you learned about the situation that Jorge Ramos was in?
I wasn't surprised because I know him.
Yeah.
And I know that he likes to live on the edge. So I wasn't surprised. I never thought that he would be in danger because, you know, a government, no matter how tough they are, they're not going to get involved in an international scandal with someone that they know is well known around the world. I think it was a very uncomfortable, and I think the good thing about what happened is that it highlighted just what kind of government that is and how they try to censor the press. That same week that Jorge and the team and Maria and the photographer, Maria was the producer that was with him, and the correspondent, I mean the photographers, that same week that they were held for 3 hours, there was a Venezuelan journalist that was put in jail for the entire week. So you know, it drew attention to the fact that there is no freedom of the press in Venezuela. So although it was a very uncomfortable situation that they went through during 3 hours, I really didn't think that they would be in danger. And you know, you have to look at the silver lining, and the silver lining is that it just highlighted, you know, how that government treats the press and censors the press.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever been worried that something similar could have happened to you and your numerous interviews with world leaders, revolutionaries, heads of states?
I think the only time where it was a little bit uncomfortable was in Panama when Manuel Noriega was still in power.
For the Panama Canal, yeah.
Yeah, we covered Panama quite a bit. I did one of the last interviews with him before the invasion, before the U.S. invasion there. And right before that, I know that when we were reporting on the street, they had let out these thugs from jail. They used to call them the Dobermans. That would be threatening his opposition with sticks on the streets. So I would be doing my stand-up on the street, reporting on whatever I was, and you're surrounded by people with sticks yelling at you, and then you're also surrounded by people on both sides. And let me explain to you why. Univision was watched in Panama. You could see it there. You could see it two ways. One was in the official network of the government, and the other one was through satellite. So people who saw it through their satellite dishes would see our newscast exactly the way that it aired. And people who watched it in the official network of the government would see a censored version where they would edit out anything we said about them. So you had people telling us, you're lying, You're lying. You're lying on both sides. You're not telling the truth. You're not talking about, all the horrible things that are happening here. And then you have these, his backers are saying, you are defaming him. And so it was tense. And that was a very dangerous place to be. I think that's the only time that I actually felt a little bit uncomfortable. I did go to Iraq, the war in Iraq 3 weeks after the war started, after President Bush declared mission accomplished. I did go into Baghdad and was there a week. And, I never really believed that there was weapons of mass destruction. So to me, it was a job that I needed to do, and I needed to go there. And we were in Kuwait for a week before we went into Baghdad. And we ended up going unilaterally. So when you get a press badge or a press pass to cover the war, there's two. Either you're embedded, which means that you are with a unit and you can only report whatever happens in that unit, in the military unit. Or you are unilateral, which means they told me you're on your own. So we were on our own and we did go into Iraq. Maybe for about a minute, I thought right before we crossed the border, I thought, what if it's true? But just for about a minute, because, I think it's the adrenaline that gets going that just, what you're thinking about at that moment is just getting there, getting the story and getting it on the air and, going to sleep in the next morning, making sure you're up early enough to go out and get another story and another story and another story. So, we were in an area that was protected by the US military, and we had to come back at a certain time because there was curfew. So I didn't really feel that much danger, but I have been in
And noticeable. Yeah. Noticeable events. Yeah. Great answer for that one. And all about bravery. So the next question says, becoming the voice of Hispanic America, as the New York Times has called you, must have taken a lot of strength and bravery, just like you said. What was the journey like to finding your own voice?
It's interesting because that is a headline that was in an article that was done about my book. And they coined it in the headline, The Voice of Hispanic America. And my youngest daughter says, Mom, it's ridiculous to say that, not that particular phrase, but, to say that you're the voice of the voiceless, because no one is voiceless. Everyone has a voice, but not everyone has a forum to use that voice. So let's say that, I'm not a voice of the voiceless, but I do have a forum. And I think it's important to have that forum and to tell the stories of Latinos and to give them also an opportunity to tell their own stories. So, working in Spanish language media, I think we did an amazing job in telling those stories. We were very much in contact with the Latino community in the US, not only here, but also in their home countries. I think a lot of people depended on us for information in their language, and information that would also help empower them, and that would help them to what some is their, newly adopted country. But remember that I started working in 1981. I know, don't start doing the numbers, okay? I was 5 years old. No. So I started working at Channel 34 in 1981. And at that time, there were only 14 million Hispanics in the country. Now there's 60 million Hispanics in the country. At that time, Spanish language television was very small, and we did not get a lot of credibility. We did not get a lot of access, but we began to grow together with the community. So the Latino community grew, Spanish language media grew, and my career grew. I think we all grew hand in hand. I always felt that. And also remember that I am the daughter of Mexican immigrants. So I always felt that I was reporting to a community that I was part of. And, I grew up in a bilingual, bicultural household, like many people that I was reporting to. My family was a working class family. I had to start working when I was 14 in order to help my parents pay the rent. So I could identify, I was one of the people that I was reporting to. I was the prototype of the types of people that I was reporting to. So I always felt that I had a good connection and a good relationship with people. So I thought it was important to tell their stories. Now that I'm working as a freelancer or a contributor, I should say, with CBS, whether it's CBS or another outlet, I really want to tell Latino stories because it's a different audience. And I am just appalled to think that given that we have such deep roots in this country, Spanish was spoken before English in the United States. We're the largest minority. We're the second largest voting bloc in the country. Out of those 60 million Latinos, 80% are US citizens. Yet we're still perceived and treated as if we were foreigners in our own country. So, you know, if we have to reintroduce ourselves, well, here we go. Let's reintroduce ourselves to this country and remind them that, you know, that we're here and we're part of your society, and we have been for a long time. If not, go to the Southwest and look at the names of the streets and the cities. They got that Spanish. So to me, now it's sort of like a mission, because, you know, it's not like I feel like I had to restart my career, because I didn't. I'm very lucky and I'm very proud, and I'm blessed really to have had the career that I had. 37 years at Univision. There was a moment when I decided that it was time to put the brake on and to say, that's it. You know when it's time for you to do something different. And there was a lot of things I wanted to do different. One, I wanted to own my own time. I wanted to feel freedom. I wanted to begin to take care of myself a little bit more. I wanted to be able to spend more time with my family, and I wanted to explore things that I hadn't done in 37 years. I started a production company. I did a show on investigation discovery, a crime show on investigation discovery. I'm now a contributor with CBS, yet I continue to do different projects. So it's not like I'm starting again to do another career. It's that now I get to pick and choose the projects that I want to work on. And it's exactly the place that I want to be, because it's not the same as when you are trying to build a career. I am very fortunate that I already built a career, and I really don't feel that anything was missing there. I am completely satisfied. There was nothing left for me to do. And I thought about it for years, because you don't leave your comfort zone, for a crazy reason or for one reason. You leave your comfort zone when you feel comfortable with where you are in life and in your career. And I felt comfortable, and it was time for me to just go out and explore.
Yeah, I can definitely say that you're missed on Spanish language media. My mom is a big fan. I told you that the other day. But I also love watching you now in English and CBS. I saw the documentary that you put out, Pandemia, and it was really good. So I think all of us here, thank you for voicing many of the opinions we have into mainstream media. I believe we had a follow-up real quick with Professor Phelps. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a bunch of, so in this chat, there are some extremely brilliant individuals, especially on our women. We have some young, truly exceptional people who are about to graduate from college, who are about to go into the world. So there are a couple questions in the chat based about how your genders have been difficult, but really the one that spoke to me that I think I'd like you to address is, as a Latina in journalism, what specific challenges and barriers have you faced? How have you overcome those obstacles? And with a follow-on, what advice would you have for our rising stars that are here from your perspective?
Yeah, so as a Latina in Spanish language media, obviously I didn't face those. My ethnicity was not an issue, because obviously I was working in Spanish language media, and you kind of have to be Latino to work in Spanish language media, or at least be fluent in Spanish. But as a woman, I did face a few challenges there. You know how, I don't know if you've heard that women have to work twice as hard to get half of the recognition that men get. Well, in Spanish language media, you have to work 3 times as hard to get 1/3 of the recognition that men get. But the good thing is that we can, because we have that God-given talent to multitask, which we should never underestimate. And I do think that Latinas have a superpower. I know it sounds very cliche-ish, but it's true. We do have a superpower. We come from families, the Latina moms and grandmothers, and I'm sure most of you know that, are really guerreras. They're fighters. They're warriors. They showed us, I think we learned from them that you can do it all. I mean, I know from my mother, I always thought, it's going to be a piece of cake that I can be a working mom. I mean, my mom was a seamstress. She always worked. She supported us My father was there too, but my mother worked, more. Yet I never felt that there was anything missing. So I said, oh, that's easy. But when I got to be a mom, I said, oh my God, now I really appreciate all the effort and all the sacrifice that she made. So I think that we pick up on that, and we sort of like inherit that. It's almost in our genes that we don't allow ourselves to be pushed around. So it's kind of genetic, I would say. It's part of our culture that we don't allow ourselves to be pushed around. And I think another thing now is that this generation is even more fierce and stronger than my generation, because my generation was still a little bit fearful. Our culture races us to, always say yes, to be submissive, to follow orders. And, this is a transitional generation that is now feeling more powerful. They're like owning their own strength. They understand what their potential is. So I think that they have more tools, let's say, to defend themselves. But, the truth is that we are still in a man's world, no matter whether it's in journalism or anywhere else. There's, what can women do? We can complain, but complaining will only put you on the list of the blacklist of complainers. Because when a man complains, things usually get fixed. But when a woman complains, what happens. Because I can't say those words, but what happens. Oh, she is a complainer, because I don't use other words in public. Anyway, or in private. So if you don't just, first of all, you do have to speak up. You have to raise your hand and say, I'm here, and just remind everyone that you're here and show what you can do with your work. But you should never let fear paralyze you, because that's the worst thing that we can do, because then people will step all over you. I think sometimes it's hard to take that first step, that first time when you confront someone, when you're either discriminated against or I always say that there's all sorts of abuse, that sexual abuse isn't the only thing that we face. There's abuse of power. And it's true, it's discrimination. It's, we're discriminated against because of our gender. There's intimidation, there's favoritism. We're gonna face those things. We face them now, we're gonna continue to face them. So we can't allow them to exist, and we can't allow them to paralyze us. Now, I'm not the militant kind. I'm not, even though I do believe in fighting, I'm not the feminist type that comes out with the flag and says, nah, I think that there's ways of doing it. Sometimes I think that there are more subtle ways of demanding your space. I wish I was. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I wish I was. I just don't have it in me to come out and punch somebody and protest but I do demand. I am very, I'm a perfectionist, so I don't keep quiet. In fact, sometimes I speak up a little too much, and I don't mean speak up in terms of being rude. I mean questioning, and why not? And how about this? And how about that? Until they know that they have to listen to me. But if I'm speaking out, it's because I know what I'm talking about. I would never speak out and ask for something if I didn't know what I was talking about. I would never demand to be allowed to do something that I wasn't 100% sure that I could do to the fullest of my potential. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It definitely was a really good answer. La siguiente pregunta la vamos a hacer en español, and we'll translate as the question goes. ¿Cree usted que es suficiente lo que está haciendo el Partido Demócrata para movilizar a los latinos? Maria Elena, do you think that the Democratic Party is doing enough to mobilize the Latino vote?
No, I don't. No creo que están haciendo lo suficiente. No digo que no están haciendo nada. Digo que no están haciendo suficiente. Porque el Partido Demócrata asume que como más del 65% de los hispanos votan demócrata normalmente, a veces hasta el 70%, sienten que es seguro y que no tienen que luchar por su voto. Pero las cosas están cambiando, y ahora sí, los hispanos se están cansando y están exigiendo más, y los hispanos quieren que los partidos pues les llamen, les toquen la puerta y les digan qué les van a ofrecer. So the answer really is, no, they're not doing enough, but I'm not saying that they're not doing anything. I'm just saying that because the majority of Latinos, let's face it, are vote Democratic or lean Democratic, sometimes they feel like they're being taken for granted. And sometimes, you know, the Democratic politicians feel that maybe they don't need to fight as much for their vote, and they put their a lot of their efforts on those that they don't feel that they don't have the support from, like independents. And anyone who is in the Republican Party that might consider, you know, coming over. So I don't think it's that they don't care. I don't think it's that I just don't think that they're doing enough.
Yeah.
And that goes to show you how now we're 32 million Latinos that are eligible to vote in 2020. Just a couple of months ago, there were between 13 and 15 million who were not registered. And every expert that I spoke to told me the same thing. Most of those 13 to 15 million said that they're not registered because no one has reached out to them. No one has asked them to register or to support them. And, you know, if that's what it's going to take, then the politicians are making a big mistake in not reaching out. I think that has changed. Unfortunately, it's in the last couple of months where everybody's running and everybody's trying to get you to register. And now you have the candidates going from city to city and from state to state. But is it too late? I don't know. You know, the important thing is that the worst thing that voters can do, I'm going to say Latino voters, but in reality, it's all voters, is say, well, if you don't come and try to attract my vote, then I'm not going to vote. Like if you were punishing somebody, you're not punishing anybody. You're punishing yourself. You're punishing your community. You're punishing your country by not voting. You're not hurting them. It's not a punishment for them. You're not doing them a favor by voting for them. You're voting for yourself, for your future. Also remember that it's not only the presidential election. It's the Congress, the Senate, it's the state elections, it's the local elections. I mean, there's so many things at stake. So a lot of us are relying on you guys. But can you please raise your hand and tell me who's registered? Raise your hand if you're registered to vote.
I sure hope that everybody on here.
Okay, Jessica, you're not registered to vote.
Jessica can't defend herself though, so she's going to have to go to the chat.
Okay. But most of them are. Okay, I'm going to assume that you're not registered because you can't. But,
not a citizen was given.
Yeah.
And a DACA, not citizen and DACA has come back.
Okay, yay, I love the DACAs. Actually, you know what? We have a lot to learn from dreamers. And that's where my philosophy comes from seeing what the dreamers have done, where they split themselves up. Apart went and they marched all the way to the White House with their cards, with their posters saying, demanding their rights. And then another part went to Congress to sit down and negotiate. That's what I mean by the militancy isn't the only way of getting things. You have to combine it the way the dreamers were able to combine it with having a conversation and explaining to the leaders in Congress, who they are and what they have to offer and what they're going through. So, I just think that they're admirable. That's why I have so much faith in this generation, because really it's the young people that are creating change, whether it's climate change or gun control or in the case of the dreamers, any movement on immigration, it's the young people that are making a difference. And the great promise is the Latino youth, because as you know, we are a young community. 40% of voters, of Latino voters, are between 18 and 49. So it's that's why I'm saying we're relying on you guys to go out and vote. And every 30 seconds, a Latino turns 18.
We're the fastest growing minority. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how we become the largest minority. And most of them are US citizens. I'm going to ask you this, Jorge. Do you have any idea what percentage of Latinos under 18 are US born?
I don't recall, but I remember seeing, I believe you had mentioned this before, but it's really high. It's like 60-something%, I believe.
93%.
93%, wow.
93% of Latinos under 18 are US born. I mean, they're very much American and they're very much a part of this country. I'm American, I was born in Los Angeles. So why wouldn't I be, why is my vote or my voice any less important than anyone else because I happen to have a Latina name, or because I developed an accent working in Spanish for so many years. I'm just as American as anyone else, and we have a lot to be proud of our cultural heritage. So I think it's very important for Latinos, especially young Latinos, to go out and vote.
That's a great cycle to the next question. So do you think that with nearly 32 million Latinos eligible to vote, it's impossible now to say that you can't reach the White House without us?
I asked that to one of the people that I most admire in analyst, Arturo Vargas, who is the CEO of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago because I am doing a story for a primetime special for CBS. And my story, guess what my story is about? The Latino vote. It's about voting in general. And there's a lot of people involved in it, but my particular story is about the Latino vote. And I asked him that because when I was at Univision, we always said no one can get to the White House without the Latino vote. And that was what we thought. And his answer was, it's not true. Someone can get to the White House without the Latino vote. And that, and the best example of that is that President Trump won in 2016. And, he got, 28% of the Latino vote. Hillary Clinton won by a landslide. Anything over 60 is a landslide with Latinos, right? So not necessarily. However, the Latino vote can tip the election in several states. Nevada is one of them. Arizona is another one. And it's very, very possible that Nevada is going to turn blue. That Arizona is going to turn blue. Because Nevada is one of those battleground states that,
it's likely blue, yeah.
But Arizona hasn't voted Democrat since 1996. So it's very, very possible that it turns blue. And if it does turn blue, it will definitely be because of the Latino vote. Because Latinos have already made a huge difference there by voting out Joe Arpaio and not allowing him to come back in, by voting out what's his name? I forgot his name right now. Russell Pierce, who was the author of SB 1070, which was the anti-immigrant law in Arizona that was then partly shut down by the courts, voted out of office by who? By the Latinos. So there's been the Latino voter turnout in Arizona from 2014 to 2018 for the midterm elections doubled. It grew by 100%. So I think that Latinos are waking up. Another term that he didn't like is that we are the sleeping giant that is going to wake up. He says, they're not sleeping. They're just wanting someone to reach out, and they're wanting those opportunities. Whatever you want to call it, whatever cliche you want to use. The important thing is that this is an opportunity for Latinos to make a difference in not only in the election, like I said before, in Arizona, in Nevada, in Florida, they could make a difference. In North Carolina, they could make a difference. Even in Wisconsin, even if it's like 5% of the population, 5% of the votes, when you have someone winning by 1%, they could definitely tip the scale. So that's why there's so much emphasis now on the part of the politicians to support to try to get the Latino vote. Romance the Latino vote, like I like to call it. But to me, I always tell people, go out and vote. I don't care who you vote for, because say, oh, you're saying to vote Democrat. No, I'm not saying to vote Democrat. I'm saying vote. Vote for whoever you want to, but vote. Because numbers matter. If after this election, politicians realize that the Latino vote is really, a vote to be reckoned with, a community that is really, that really goes out there and votes, that means that there's consequences for them ignoring the Latino vote.
Community, yeah.
Otherwise, we're going to be in this vicious circle that they don't reach out to us because we don't vote, and we don't vote because they don't reach out to us. And then it's a vicious circle that we're never going to get out of. And, why leave it to them to end that vicious circle? We have to end that vicious circle by showing up and voting and showing our political strength. We already, show our economic strength. We contribute so much as consumers, as taxpayers, as part of the workforce, as entrepreneurs, business owners. We create jobs. So culturally, of course, we have an incredible impact, but we need to flex our political muscle because that's what it's all about. That's how they're going to begin to pay attention to us.
Yeah. If anybody hasn't voted just yet, just a quick plug, go to votolatino.org and get registered. Professor Phelps, go ahead. I think you're muted. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Has to happen once every call. UNLV has a vibrant Latinx population, and many of our students are graduating and entering a workforce. Do you have advice? What advice would you give to our young Latinx entering the workforce who may want to run for public policy, who may want to be lawyers, or who just are entering business world? They'd like your advice.
I mean, I would imagine that by now, you know, you're graduating. Hopefully you did some internships. I think internships are the most important thing that you can do when you're in college. I would say one thing to do is to have patience and to be perseverante. How do you say perseverant? To knock on as many doors as you can, to push as much as you can, but be patient, because we are going through a difficult time right now. Even before the pandemic, I think. You know, my daughters graduated from college. One of them last year, and the other one almost 3 years ago, and she just started an MBA. And it was really tough for them to find a job after they graduated. I honestly believe very strongly in professional organizations that you can belong to. Like if you want to be a journalist, be part of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. But you know, no matter what field you're in, there's always a professional association, some kind of organization where they welcome students, they welcome alumni, they welcome, you know, recent graduates, and help you and guide you. It's really important to take advantage of that. It's really important to take advantage of contacts, of people that you might know that might help you open doors. But don't get discouraged, because let me tell you, you have to be extremely lucky in the right place in the right time to be able to get a job in your first try. I mean, it takes a long time. So you need to have patience and believe in yourself, and believe in what you're worth, and believe in your strength and your education. I mean, you already have something that's very valuable and that no one can take away from you, and that is your education. I mean, you're going out there with some very strong weapons. You know, in Spanish we say armas. It sounds weird in English.
The translation is, yeah.
The translation sounds weird. In English, in Spanish we say tenemos las armas, but it doesn't mean like guns and stuff. It's like, you know, the qualities, the qualifications, the tools, let's say, that you need. And your education is one of the most important ones that you can have. So, you know, go out there and do it. I can tell you that my daughter just, she went to business school. At American University. She graduated working in an advertising agency during the pandemic. She's been living with me. And just a few months ago, she said, you know what? I think I'm going to get an MBA, and I'm going to have to leave work because it's very demanding. Both the job that she was doing, she was working from home, and the other. And she thought, if not now, when? Because if I don't do it now that I'm living at home, in a few years from now, when I'm on my own, I'm not going to be able to get the MBA, because, you know, she planned ahead and said, you know, once I leave there, here I am with not only an MBA, but 2 years experience in the advertising industry. And that gives me even more. But I know that it's tough because, and it's unfair actually, because, you know, you apply for a job and they say, well, do you have any experience? No, I just graduated. Well, no, we need someone with experience. You know, that's just not right. That's just not fair. That's why I'm saying that internships are important. If you have to start off with an internship, even though you've already graduated, go for it. Because sometimes the most important thing is to get your foot in the door and then show what you can do. And then your other foot will come in the door, and then your whole body will be in there. And then they'll tell you, stay here and we're not going to let you leave.
As we head to the end of the conversation, Maria Elena, somebody asked somewhat of a loaded question in Spanish, which I'll try to translate as I go along. ¿Cómo puede uno inspirar a otros latinos en un tiempo como ahora en donde el ambiente ha causado que muchos se avergüencen de sus raíces latinas? So the translation would be, how can we inspire Latino folks who during the current political climate have felt a change in the emotion that it's drawn towards us?
You know, I'm sorry that, you know, people are feeling that way. I think it's horrible. When I was talking before about, Trump and his rhetoric and how his rhetoric is against undocumented immigrants, I don't think that not just him, but anyone else who lashes out at undocumented immigrants, I don't think they realize how they say, oh, no, I'm okay with you. It's not you, it's those illegals that I don't like. They don't realize the effect that has. Not only because they might be talking about someone in your family. My father was undocumented. So my father wasn't a criminal or a rapist or a drug dealer. They might be talking about your uncle, your neighbor, or whatever. Or people will perceive you as if you were a criminal. So when you demonize a part of a community, the whole community is going to feel it. But we have to be proud of who we are. We have to own it. We have to just ignore the noise. Speak out and denounce it. And if if you get one of these Karens, turn your camera on and put it out there, because people need to know that they're there, that they're out there. You don't have to suffer in silence. You should denounce it, but hold your head up high and don't let it affect you emotionally, because when someone attacks you, it says more about them than you. It says more about, the evilness that they have inside, or the bitterness that they have inside, or maybe they're just unhappy people that have to lash out at someone else and insult them. Because when you think about it, what kind of a person does that? What kind of a person insults someone else because of what they look like, or where they come from, or how they speak? It has to be someone that is very unhappy with their life. So you should really feel sorry for them, not sorry for yourself, because you have two cultures and two languages. You have more than they do. I mean, I've always felt that way. That's why I don't know if I grew up being very proud of my cultural heritage and being bicultural and being bilingual. And my mother always celebrated, all the holidays, 4th of July, Cinco de Mayo, 16 de septiembre, Thanksgiving, everything. I mean, yeah, we used to put hot sauce on our turkey, but yeah, it was still an American holiday. It was still an American holiday. And so the food that we ate and everything. So I always felt very proud of both. And that gave me a feeling that that I was worth more. I don't know. In my era, it was, if you speak two languages, you're worth more. Because actually, that it used to be that if you spoke Spanish, you got paid more. Now you speak Spanish and they attack you and criticize you. And, in my era, it was like, it's an asset to speak Spanish, to speak two languages, to speak 3 or 4, that's even better. My father spoke 6 languages. I mean, that's a huge asset. So, you don't have to apologize for who you are. You need to feel proud of who you are. And like I said before, you do get that. It might sound like a cliche and corny, but you do get that strength from the struggle of your parents and your grandparents or your great-grandparents or whoever it is that was your immigrant background. Because everyone has an immigrant story. Sometimes it's you as an immigrant, sometimes it's your parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents, but we are all immigrants or our ancestors are immigrants.
Well, Maria Elena Salinas, this was the last question, and I can't thank you enough for joining the Political Science Club today and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Ha sido uno de los honores más grandes para mí tenerla hoy con nosotros. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Gracias por invitarme, and thank you to all of you. And Ms. Phelps, thank you so much.